Are you a newer player looking for some guidance on who to fill out your roster with? Well, allow me to help you with that. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. I'm going to focus on 5 stars that are both powerful and very beginner friendly. These polls will be excellent to make if you're a new player, or somebody who is returning to the game after a prolonged break. For the record, even if you've been playing the game for a long time, the general positive qualities that I'm going to state about these characters are still going to hold true on the whole. So you might still learn a thing or two. I'll go over the best DPSes, second slot teammates, and healers that you can pull, then tell you about the 5 stars that you should completely avoid as a new player. For starters, I'd like to recommend none other than the fine lady who is currently on banners, that being Jinchi, the almighty magistrate of Jinzhou. This character is an ideal pick for essentially any account out there. However, if you're a beginner, then you couldn't be in more luck, because she is one of the most beginner-friendly units in the entire game. This is for a multitude of reasons. For starters, she is stupidly easy to play. If you're somebody who has only recently begun the game and wants an accessible character to get used to the game's mechanics, then Jinchi is an excellent first choice. She is one of the simplest possible rotations in the game out of any main carry, while dealing frick tons of damage while she's at it. The gameplay is quite literally as simple as entering her skill state, doing a couple of normal attacks, then firing off her insane nukes, then occasionally popping her ult once every other rotation when you have it up. She is practically foolproof, and you'll find yourself getting used to her very quickly. She's well worth learning in the long run too, because she is not only beginner friendly, but is also the best main DPS in the entire game on average. So you're investing your time into a character that is going to be useful to you for an extremely long time to come. This is all not even mentioning how free-to-play friendly she is. If you're just starting out, it's highly likely that you don't have any 5-star teammates for her, not a single Jojo or Yinlin to your name. However, do not fear, because Yuanwu is here. Yes, that's right, this free character that you get relatively early on can work perfectly with her. You see, this is because Jinchi likes it when her teammates do coordinated attacks. That's the main reason as to why you would use that dandy chap. You don't actually have to invest into him all that much. Leaving him at level 20 is perfectly fine, because you're not using him for his personal output at all. He's simply just a Jinchi stack spot. Now, with that being said, if you're having trouble of dodging or surviving, there is absolutely no shame in leveling him up so that you can have an easier time in the TOA. You're easily able to equip him on 3-star gauntlets with Originite Type 3, and put him on 5-piece Rejuvenating Glow. This will turn him into quite the effective support, as not only is he providing your Jinchi with her much desired stacks, but he also has some additional buffing. Isn't that neat? Then your first slot can quite frankly be anyone. If you chose Verena as your first standard 5-star character, which is something that you should be doing if you have interest in optimization due to her being an S-tier character, then you can easily form the free-to-play friendly comp of the Jinzhou Magistrate, Yuanwu, and Verena. However, if you have no interest in the Plank Kid, it's all good. You can get away with using Baichi very easily. This team is as beginner-friendly as it gets, as the characters involved aren't really all that difficult to play whatsoever. Pretty much anybody could pick up and play these units. If you don't want to use Yuanwu, there's also Mortefi as an option. However, he is generally better used with other characters. Also, the blue lad doesn't require that much investment at all, whereas it'd be a waste to not invest into Mortefi. So for resource efficiency's sake, I would opt for the blue chap here. There's also the fact that Ages of Harvest is one of the best broadblades in the game as of now. And because this game heavily encourages weapon swapping, I would say it's worth investing into this specific one. It will work for all Broadblade users in the game. This is especially relevant, because another character that I'm going to be recommending is a fantastic wielder of this weapon choice too. Generally, the rule of thumb in this game is that you want to pick up a limited 5-star of each weapon type, and Jinchi's is a fantastic choice when it comes to the Broadblade niche in specific. Plus, there are some other really cool benefits to this character for a newer player too, that being, she's very friendly to progression. What I mean by this is that hypothetically, let's say that you pull Carlotta and Jojo later on. Vasily Painter is an excellent Jinchi support. However, you're gonna have her tied to your Carlotta, but because Jinzhou's Magistrate works so well with multiple different teammates, you're still easily able to build a team for her and not feel handicapped. This makes her super roster friendly, so you're able to put something together for her no matter what stage of the game that you're currently at. Her long-term investment is great too, boasting some excellent sequences if you were ever interested in maintaining her over time. Alright, now that we've discussed that lovely lady, let us move on to another resident of Jinzhou, a handsome lad at that. Jian is my next recommendation for a good 5-star DPS to pull for as a new player. He also wields Jinchi's Broadblade with excellent efficiency, which is part of why I shielded earlier. You can make great use out of Harvest on both of these characters. The reason as to why I recommend Jian for a newbie is simple, because he himself is extremely simple. Like, you have to try hard to mess up playing this guy. You really can't go wrong. You cast his ult when you have half of his Forte bar up, then do a bunch of normal attacks, and use a skill when it's available during that ult. Quite literally as basic as that. There is only one other character who I consider to be that simple gameplay-wise, who we will touch on later. Much like Jinchi, he is able to operate wonderfully on 4-star teammates. However, a nice difference is that instead of only performing really well with fun, but not having them as his best in slot, his best second slot pick is indeed actually a 4-star. That would be Mortefi, the best heavy attack buffer that we currently have in the game as of now. So that also makes him very teammate efficient. His third slot can be pretty much any generic healer, whether that be Baichi, Varina, or Shorekeeper. That means, once again, you're able to easily form a 4-star team with him. Gion, Mortefi, and Baichi. His performance is also really solid. He released all the way back in 1.0, being the first ever limited 5-star character available to pull for in the game, and to this day, he's still a really good choice. He can clear all endgame content very easily while having a lovely specialty in AoE, so you can use him for the more AoE-focused TOA chambers, which is cool. That also makes him super convenient for tacit field farming, because he groups up all of the enemies around you. Also, while I prefer Ages of Harvest, I do think that his own Broadblade is pretty good too, if you'd rather optimize Gion. Understandable, he's very handsome. He is genuinely as simple as it gets gameplay-wise, I cannot emphasize that enough. You will not find a more easy to play DPS than him. The main drawback that I can think of for this guy is that his sequences aren't all that great. So once you've got him on a nice 5-star weapon with all of his best gear sorted out, along with an S6 Mortefi, you're pretty much good to go from there. For the record, S0 Mortefi is still very strong with him, and remains as his de facto best in slot second slot pick. Also, it's unlikely that Kuro is going to buff him much, because they consider him to already be complete as a character. They did indirectly buff him for the introduction of Nightmare Echoes, as now you can get a much better Feli and Berengal for him. But I wouldn't expect a 5-star heavy attack buffer to be added anytime in the near future for him. Otherwise, he's a 10 out of 10 choice for a new player. Easily. He performs very consistently. The final new player DPS that I'm going to recommend is Camellia. This is because not only is she one of the strongest, but she's also one of the simplest. Her playstyle is really easy to understand. You simply spin a lot and then pop out nukes when they're available to you. The only thing that I find a bit iffy about her is that you're unable to freely move around during a portion of a rotation, but if you can put up with that, then she's very easy to operate while doing crazy high amounts of havoc damage. Sanhua is free for everybody to obtain rather early on, and she also happens to be one of Camellia's absolute best installed teammates. Her playstyle is easy, her Concerto rotation is super quick, and there's a crud ton of basic percent buffing in her outro skill, and on the whole, she's an amazing support for this character. What's nice is that Camellia does not step on the toes of the other units that I've recommended in this video. She has no interest whatsoever in Yuan Wu or Mortefi, only wanting Sanhua as her best 4-star teammate. There is Donjin as an option too, but I find that Sanhua is infinitely more beginner friendly. So I'm going to be recommending her first and foremost, even if I think that Donjin's an absolute cutie patootie. Red Spring is an amazing sword, so a really good choice to pick as the main limited 5-star sword on your account. Pick either Red Spring or Blazing Brilliance as your main sword on your account. You can't really go wrong with either in my opinion. Definitely one of the most user-friendly characters out there. The spin playstyle is really hard to mess up. Certainly a wise choice to consider her. The nice thing is that if you pull for all 3 of these characters as a brand new player, you're easily able to form free teams for the TOA, which cover a wide variety of scenarios. Jinchi, Yuanwu, Healer, Gion, Mortefi, Healer, and Camellia, Sanhua, Healer. It's as easy as that. I believe that all of the DPSs recommended here are going to serve you excellently both in the short and long term, being some of the easiest characters to play in the game, while also boasting brilliant strength. Jinchi and Camellia in particular are considered to be S-tier characters by many, with Gion being a very stable A-tier. So now let's discuss 5-star second slot teammates. Essentially the sub-DPS or support that will be boosting the performance of the character that you've got in the first slot. To be totally honest with you, there's only one that I would recommend to new players. That would be none other than everybody's favorite silly painter, Joja. She is good for a vast multitude of reasons. As always, I'm really trying to focus on the easy playability of characters that I recommend here, and Joja's got absolutely incredible ease of use. She is not hard to play whatsoever, being the simplest of any second slot teammate that we currently have in the game. She's best in slot for Jinchi, being an upgrade over Yuan Wu by quite a significant margin. She's also best in slot for Carlotta, another S-tier DPS that you might consider pulling for later down the line. She's extremely free-to-play friendly, as you're mostly using her for her outro skill buffing, not her personal damage. Therefore, getting a 5-star weapon for her really isn't necessary, even if it is a nice bonus boost. Her skill percent buffing is perfect for Jinchi and Carlotta, with the glacial percent being especially nice for the latter. She can hold 5-piece Moonlit Clouds or Empyrean, both of which boost the attack percent of your main DPS, which is absolutely lovely. She builds up the Magistrate stacks efficiently thanks to her high volume of coordinated attacks, and she is all round a very easy character to utilize effectively. Some quick advice: remember to heavy attack after using skill to summon her third teleport, and whenever you teleport, press spacebar or press jump if you're on mobile after she does a teleport to cancel the long animation. It's a very easy technique that even beginners can pick up pretty quickly. If you do choose to invest into a 5-star weapon for her, don't get Rime Draped Sprouts. Is it a good weapon for her? Yes, absolutely. However, String Master is actually the best overall rectifier in the game right now, being best in slot or close to best in slot for every single rectifier user in the game that focuses on damage dealing. Stringmaster isn't even that far behind Rhyme Draped in terms of performance on the silly painter, so keep that in mind if you intend to invest into her long term. I'm giving Yinlin an honorable mention. I don't really like recommending her because her gameplay is not as simple as Jojo, and she feels much worse without a 5-star weapon as opposed to a silly painter. But with that being said, she's good for casual Shangli Yao teams, and is also an upgrade over Yanwu and Jitchi teams. So it'd be wrong of me not to point out her potential in those areas. Also, with Stringmaster, she has the highest sub-DPS damage in the entire game, so she has that going for her as well. But otherwise, prioritize the painter. With healers, there's not really much to recommend because Kuro hasn't added a whole ton of them into the game yet. The only limited 5-star that I can recommend you get is Shorekeeper. I actually consider her to be the best 5-star in the entire game as of now, as she's amazing for literally every single team, featuring amazing crit buffs and heals. The only thing is that you have to understand how intro skills work in order to turn her field golden, which gives you the max amount of buffs that she can provide, but to be honest, that's really simple to understand. I made a full beginner's guide explaining the basics of Wuthering Waves combat if that's something that you struggle with. Otherwise, she is literally perfect for new players, especially because of how she helps out people with skill issues so much. Her healing is absolutely massive, she's really easy to build, and requires minimal resource investment, and Kuro recently added a 4-star rectifier into the game that you can get via rinascita quests as a free-to-play friendly option for her if you don't have variation, so there's literally a perfect 4-star for her that's free in-game if you end up getting unlucky with your weapon pulls over time. She also has really nice sequences. If you go for her S2, which provides a 40% attack buff to your entire team, you've effectively buffed every single team in the game. Congratulations! Therefore making her an excellent pull in the long term, and well worth spending more Astrites on when her reruns arrive over time. I would argue that Shorekeeper is honestly the #1 limited 5-star that you as a new player should be aiming to save for if you're just starting out. She buffs all of your teams, and because Kuro adds DPSes more than they add supports, the support meta moves much more slowly, so she's bound to last for a very long time. Even when we do eventually get upgrades over her, she will still be relevant, because the TOA demands 3 teams. If another healer that is equally as good as her gets added to the game, that simply means that Baichi will be replaced on your account, leaving you with whoever that potential healer would be, Shorekeeper, and Verena. Quick side note. Do not pull for Shorekeeper's signature weapon, unless you really like how it looks, because it is the most nothing upgrade ever. Sure, it's an upgrade, but it's much less impactful compared to pulling for a 5-star weapon for your main DPS characters. You should have it as your absolute last priority, not worth the Astrites as a new player compared to all of the other potential pulls that you could be making. And no, don't use Stringmaster on her either, even if it's best in slot on all other rectifiers. She's a support. That would make literally no sense. Use variation the moment that you get your hands on a copy. Otherwise, the 4-star weapon from the Facilio Falls Towers questline will work just fine. This is the thing that you want to follow in order to get that 4-star weapon, by the way. Just do all of those, then you'll get the weapon at the end of the whole thing. It's very worth doing, by the way. I found that whole sequence to be a lot of fun. Sequences mentioned. Always get ST on Shorekeeper before even thinking about getting her signature. Otherwise, I would suggest choosing Verena as your standard 5-star, because even with Shorekeeper around, the Plant Kid remains as an excellent healer and buffer. She will cover for your other TOA teams, does coordinated attacks, which is super cool for Jinchi, has a really fast rotation, and you don't have to invest into her all that much. You'll get a whole lot of kilometerage out of her. She will be an amazing choice for your other TOA teams. Also, if you're struggling survivability-wise, you can always level her up more. She has an inherent skill which prevents you from getting one-shot if you're having a really tough time too, but once you get a little better at the game, you won't need that anymore. Otherwise, we'll just have to wait until Kuro adds more limited 5-star healers into the game. For those unsure as to who your third healer would be, you can use Baichi, but once you get good enough at the game, you're able to simply not use a 3rd slot teammate in the weaker TOA floors. Then for some 5-star characters that you want to avoid like the Plague as a new player. I am a huge Chang Li fan. She is one of my favorite characters. I love her to bits. She is intelligent, cool, and has some great sound effects in her playstyle. However, with that being said, please do not pull for her as a new player. She is one of the most complex characters to play in the entire game. If you want to make good use out of her, then you have to learn quick swapping, which is quite a high skill technique, especially when playing Chang Li. She can be an extremely strong unit, but only when you play her well. Avoid her like the plague when you're just starting out. She is going to feel absolutely awful for you as a new player. She has really high potential, but if you can't play her teams very well, then she is one of the worst limited 5-stars in the game. Her value as a character is very relative to player skill. For the record, I'm not calling Chang Li a bad character. She's actually really good, but only if you can actually learn to play her. Jumping into quick swapping as a new player is trying to run before you learn to walk. take it easy and skip her if you're in no particular rush to get her. Get better at the game first before considering her whatsoever. There are just too many complex things to manage within her teams, and the gameplay of her comps are just far too fast-paced and precise for me not to point out how you shouldn't get her as a new player. Alternatively, if that sort of challenge sounds fun to you, then by all means, go for her. She's smoking hot too, so that's a major bonus. Obviously pull for who you want. I suck at playing her, but I still use her because I love the character dearly. But from an optimization standpoint, please don't get her if you're not willing to learn her. I cannot drive that point home enough. I will at least say that Blazing Brilliant is a good choice as your main 5-star sword. Otherwise, you can just go for Red Spring. Please avoid choosing Call Charo as your first standard. As cool as he is, and as much as I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII, bro just sucks, I'm not gonna lie. He's really clunky to play, and even if you learn how to play him well, the damage you get for the effort that you put in is really underwhelming. It's a whole lot of complexity to learn a character who isn't really going to impress you all that much. He's allergic to any encounter that features more than one target, and he's really beginner unfriendly. He's easily interrupted too, and dodging can lead to a massive damage loss on the guy. Now if you think he's really cool or really hot or something, then sure, go ahead, but you're going to be very disappointed with his performance in the long term. Encore is a much better choice as a standard 5-star DPS. Ling Yang should be avoided too, as he's even clunkier while doing even less damage. Yes, this guy is somehow in a worse position than Verdleroth. Feels absolutely terrible to play, riddled with gameplay issues, while doing freaking negative numbers. Treat this character as if he doesn't even exist, even if you lose a 50-50 to him, unless he's a personal favorite of yours. The unit is absolute trash. Do not pull for Roshia. I recommended Camellia as one of the DPSes that you should be gunning for as a newer player. However, with that being said, Roshia is hardly an increase over an S6 Sanhua. It's not that the Clown Kid has zero potential, as she is a decent character. The issue is that Sanhua exists, so it's very hard to justify pulling her for the crazy lady specifically, and while getting Roshia's S1 makes her better than the Magistrate's Bodyguard for sure, you'd much rather pour those Astrites into getting a couple copies of Camellia and Red Spring. It's literally more worth it to get all of Camellia's sequences up to S6 before it's worth getting any copies of Roshia. Not even one. She's currently the worst limited 5-star character in the game right now in terms of value. She'd be amazing if Sanhua didn't exist and wasn't literally free, but unfortunately, she is. So unless you really like the character, skip her at all costs. Hardly an upgrade over the free-to-play option for Camellia. I implore that you aim for those sequences instead. Being in 2.0, it's highly likely that there's people returning to the game after a long break, or newer players starting for the first time that were wondering who to prioritize pulls-wise, if they're interested in clearing endgame content. I have full faith in all of the characters that I've recommended here today. As of uploading this video, Jinchi still has a bit over a week left on banners, so there's still a chance to pick her up and get started on building up your roster if you're interested. Obviously pull for who you want, but I got inspired to make this video by being asked on stream a couple of times who to prioritize pulling for as a newer player, or whether certain characters were worth it or not as a new player. And some others chimed in to say that the advice was helpful to them too. So here's hoping I was able to assist you all in such a dilemma. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week, every week on Saturdays starting from 3 PM UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to tell you who to pull for as a new or returning player in Wuthering Waves. This has been Juice, signing out, and the real reason to pull for all of these characters? Jinchi has a pet dragon. Jion in Wuthering Waves specifically is best boy. Specifically in Wuthering Waves, Lighter clears him. Camellia is balls off the walls. Juja is silly. And Shorekeeper is a digital waifu in a game about digital waifus and husbandos. Therefore, breaking the system.